everyone. Welcome to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my special guest, Meghala Divakaran. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on, Meg. I am so excited to talk to you about your vegan baking. I love it, and I can't wait to hear more about it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you kind of got to start your vegan baking business?
Awesome. First off, thank you, Desiree, for giving me this opportunity to talk about not just my business, but my journey so far as a woman runner, a woman vegetarian turned vegan runner. So all of this basically started roughly about 3-4 years ago when I reached a point in my life where I felt like I was in a rut. For all external appearances, I had everything. I had a job in a top company and I was doing well. It had been 5 years, but I had climbed up the rungs and I have a beautiful family, a home in Almaden Valley, San Jose. So for all, like I said, external appearances, I had it, but I felt like I wasn't doing anything meaningful. I wasn't making any sort of difference. I feel like everybody reaches that point, call it midlife crisis, call it whatever you want, where you start to question everything. And for me, it was my year that I turned 40, when I felt like I was just, going about life like there was nothing in it. I mean, every day just began and ended and nothing interesting happened, right? So somebody just forwarded a flyer for a half marathon training program within the company. And I'm like, a half marathon? I haven't walked 13.1 miles, let alone run 13 miles, right? So like, this is something that's not going to happen. I'm not going to be able to fulfill this goal. But I thought to myself, maybe this is the challenge that I was waiting for. Let's see if I can do this. And I knew that I would be incredibly proud of myself if I were able to go through it successfully. And lo and behold, it was the San Francisco Marathon in June 2019, I believe. The half marathon, I must make that distinction clear. The training was awesome, but more than the training, I think it was the type of people I met, the athletes, the thinking behind the athletic brain, I think that caught me. I enjoyed being out on my own, having thoughts to myself. I enjoyed pushing myself, of course, and I enjoyed listening to other perspectives about why people ran. So when you talk to a person who is not an athlete or who doesn't do endurance sports or anything endurance, it's very difficult for them to understand why we push ourselves, right? So for me, I got such varied responses for that. But I think the underlying theme there was that you go beyond the external crutches, right? It's not about physical appearance. It's not about where you live, what you do, et cetera, et cetera. It's about pushing yourself beyond a wall that you thought you had in your life. And
That's
once
right.
you cross that wall, I mean, the sky's the limit, right? I mean, it's such a cathartic, it's such a therapeutic, it's such a life-changing experience, I feel. And that, the adrenaline high, the I believe it's called anandamide, right? The endorphins, it's no longer endorphins, the anandamides that flood your system. I mean, that's really like nothing else. The feeling of air on your face, it's a complete package. And I was a convert, right? Another thing that happened during those 4 months of training was that as a vegetarian runner, I found it difficult to pay attention to the extra protein that I had to consume, the types of protein that I had to consume, etc. Up until then, I hadn't even thought about protein, right? I was vegetarian. I was eating a lot of veggies and fruits, but not really thought about protein as such. And so I started consuming energy bars, right? That was something that was brought to my attention in my training in one of the nutrition counseling sessions. And that was the first time I had heard of goo gels and all of this, all of the different bars out there. And I thought, there are a few plant-based bars, but many of them have high levels of fat. There's a lot of sugar, and there are ingredients out there that I can't pronounce, right? There was one bar, the perfect bar that I liked, but I did not go through the ingredients carefully. Later, when I did, I realized that they have egg powder, right? So, and they were expensive. That was the other thing, right? So I started, concocting things in my kitchen. That was around the time that I also we had moved. So I had there was a time when I wasn't commuting to work, so I had extra time in my days. And let me try and come up with my own bar. I think that lasted about a year when I was just putting things together, experimenting. Lots of thrown bars, etc. But at the end, I think I had something that I could eat and that I could share with my children, right? It was a very convenient snack. And so that's how it started about a year ago. And then after we moved to Almaden Valley, I had stopped being consistent with my running. Most of my running friends were in Sunnyvale, Cupertino, that side. And all of the local runs were in that side. And 20-30 minutes of a commute wasn't something that I wanted to do 3 times a week. So I joined this amazing organization called Vibha, very similar to Asha, the group that trained me first. Vibha is also a nonprofit whose mission it is to educate and empower children from impoverished situations, underprivileged children, essentially, in India and the United States, right? They are a national organization with a chapter in the Bay Area. And I was really fortunate to participate in their Dream Mile race last year. As part of the fundraising mission, I had to raise money, and I wasn't on Facebook. I wasn't very well connected on social media. And I felt very awkward asking my friends to, give money to a cause that I believed in. And so I started bringing these bars, and it was just an accident that a fellow runner who also happened to be vegetarian tasted it, and she loved it, right? And she was also one of the main persons who was in charge of something they called a fundraising picnic, where they allow all participants to bring whatever it is that they want to bring. It doesn't have to be food. It could be, one of my friends is a book publisher, so she read a book, for instance, right? So another is a Bombay Jam instructor, so she had a dance session. So all of us brought our skills, and I brought my bars, and they were sold out, right? And they yes. And then Running Revolution is this other company, it's a running store in Campbell, whose owner is a longtime supporter of Vibha. And I had a little table outside his store twice, and both times I was sold out. And many women in that group really pushed me to do something more serious, rather than just put things in a box and take them to my runs, right? So it was, I remember it was Padmaja and Renuka, a couple of women, Anita as well, who really motivated me to convert it into a business and look at the paperwork and see what it took to make it a licensed business, so to speak. And I have to say, it was my sister-in-law who I remember one day sat me down. She is in India. Her name is Renuka. She sat me down in India at a coffee shop. So at this point, this is last year, right? So I quit my job at this company. I don't want to mention the name for various reasons. The big reason was that, like I said, I felt a vacuum. I wanted to do something different. And I thought I was taking a break and that I would go back. But during that 1 year when I was experimenting with my bars and running, etc., not only did I realize that I had to do something on the nutrition front for myself and for my friends, I also really experienced what it felt to be a woman who was not in the corporate world, who wasn't within stroke contributing to the economy in a meaningful way in a tech world, right? I mean, we are very much in the tech world. And as a non-tech person interested in baking and running, I got several messages that were very confusing to me. And let me just say that they pulled me down, right? I felt like I had no power over how I felt. Peer pressure was a real thing. It was rough for about a year and a half there. I was more than lost, right? I would have long conversations with my children and my husband, and I definitely had their support. But at the end of the day, I had to take a decision about how I felt and choose happiness, right? In that context, when my sister-in-law sat me down and said, stop applying for jobs and focus on this idea that you have, that your running friends have been encouraging you to do something about. And she gave me a deadline. She said, the next 6 months, I want you to come up with something concrete. And that was the seed, right? So that's when I started researching the cottage food law. And I realized that with minimum investment, I could test this product out in the market and see how much interest there is and start my own business, become an entrepreneur. And so it took about 9 months of back and forth, figuring out the rules, the do's and the don'ts, etc. But I launched at the end of September, and it's been about a couple of months now. And I've been busy, not overwhelmingly so, but I haven't been happier. I think that's the best way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. And really that speaks volumes. When you're happy, really that's the most important thing. I mean, obviously money is important too, for sure.
Absolutely.
But your happiness it transcends, right? It carries over to your family, to your friends, everybody. And that light that you, glow from your happiness just spreads. That's amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So So tell us a little bit more about how the cottage, food business is sort of different than starting a regular business.
Sure. So the cottage food law has been around for many years now. I don't have the exact date when it was, thought of or formed. But California has been one of the pioneers in this, and we have one of the most progressive laws anywhere in the country. So basically, the cottage food law allows you to use your home kitchen to sell food, essentially. And the idea, there are two broad types. There's the permit A and there's the permit B. Under permit A, there is no kitchen inspection involved. You have to go through a food safety course, and you have to have the right zone in which your house is placed. You have to get a zonal verification letter. You have to get your labels approved by the state health department. So you have to go through that process. But other than a few things here and there in terms of paperwork, it's a very convenient way to see if there is a market for your products. In permit B, there is an inspection involved. They come in and make sure that your kitchen is appropriate to sell food from. But the difference between permit A and permit B is that permit B allows you to sell to a third-party store. So for instance, I could have my bars at a Whole Foods and they could sell for me and give me a percentage. Whereas in permit A, I have to sell directly to a customer. So I can, for instance, be at a farmer's market. I can be outside a Whole Foods if the manager gives me permission, but I can't sell at Whole Foods. So the cottage food law is great for people who are trying to start off. The investment is low, right? The Forager podcast is this amazing resource that gives you everything that you need to know about starting a cottage food business, all the laws, distributed across counties in California. The other thing with the cottage food law, permit A, is that you're not allowed to sell outside California. But once you get permit B, you can sell outside California. So it's super convenient. The rules are not all that difficult to follow. You just have to know what foods are permitted and what foods are not. The other great thing about the cottage food law is that you are trained to follow sanitation practices that ensure that your food is clean and safe, basically, right? So to the extent that you don't even really have to have a liability insurance, but I do have a liability insurance just as an extra layer of precaution. But they make sure that you know what you're doing in the kitchen and the kinds of precautions you have to take that perhaps as a home baker you wouldn't be aware of or wouldn't pay attention to. So I think it's a great way to start off. I think the difference between this and a regular corporation is that, one, the number of employees you have are limited. So I am a sole entrepreneur. I could hire people. The rules are slightly different if you have a bigger organization. But otherwise, I think just the fact that you're using your home kitchen to sell food from, it's such a big convenience. But there are all of these sanitation and hygiene practices that you have to take into account. You don't have to go to a commercial kitchen, which is the other differentiating factor if you have a regular corporation.
True. Yeah. And that's a great point that you just brought up, because then you're talking about a whole nother layer of expenses in trying to rent or use a commercial kitchen space.
Yes, absolutely.
So that opens up a whole new, can of I'm not going to say worms, but worms.
In the Bay Area, the other problem with commercial kitchens is availability. There aren't enough commercial kitchens, with the time that you need in any given week, right? Because you block off certain sections of time. So I think this is the best of both worlds. Yep.
Yeah, that's excellent. And so how are you placing yourself to be competitive with, because there are quite a few of these different kinds of protein bars that are available on the market. And as you said in the beginning, they're not all, vegetarian, or if they are, they maybe have some ingredients in there that wouldn't qualify as vegan. Yep. And so how are you placing yourself to be competitive with those?
So a couple of things. One, again, through the cottage food law and the back and forth I had with the health department, I call my bars energy bars and not protein bars, because the main difference is that under permit A, there is no real way to say that your bar has 19 or 20 grams of protein, because these are not tested in a lab. So the other thing my bars are energy bars because they have 10 or 11 grams of protein. And the sort of protein that I use are not isolates, right? So most vegetarian / vegan or plant-based protein energy bars out there, nutrition bars out there, use pea protein, for instance. I'm just throwing an example out there. This is an isolate. And basically, it goes through an extraction process where the fiber and the other the package that nature intended is stripped and just the protein is extracted, right? So it's a very intense source of protein, if you want to use the term intense, but it is an extraction. And so the fiber that comes with the seed or the nut is no longer available, right? So I use seed powders, right? So there are other bars that use seed powders, but I use seed powders that are just powders and not added with sucrose or any other fillers. They're just, so if I powder them at home sometimes, right? So, and it's a combination of 4 seeds. So the watermelon, chia, flax, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds. So I just powder these seeds, and that's my main source of protein. The other differentiating factor is that I read a lot about products that are not in our everyday reading or on TV. It's not something that you hear about on a regular basis. There's Chocho, for instance, or Sacha Inchi, right? So these are, again, legume seeds that are very commonly available in South America, but are slowly beginning to make an entry in the North American market. There are a few companies that, they have a process for making them organic and making sure the saponins, the tannins, etc., that may be harmful to you are removed. And you get this really great source of protein that's all natural, that has fiber, that's not just great for you as a consumer, but also great for the environment. Chocho powder, for instance, is from Ecuador, and this powder is doing amazing things for the local economy of Ecuador, because this is a legume that grows in the wild. It nourishes the soil that it grows in by introducing nitrogen back into the soil. So it helps in regenerative agriculture. So I'm always looking for these sources, and I'm happy to say that a couple of my bars use Chocho and Sacha Inchi, again, in their raw, natural form. So that's another way that I differentiate myself. And I think the biggest thing is that my bars are not just vegan, but they're also nut-free. Right. So I don't use peanuts. I don't use any form of nuts in my bars. And there are a few, but I think they are harder to come by. And even if you see them, they are more expensive. So yeah, so my bars are nut-free. They are gluten safe. I choose to use the term safe versus free because I'm not a gluten-free household. So I do have wheat flour on one shelf that is separate from every other shelf in the kitchen. But yes, so I'm a gluten-safe, nut-free, 100% vegan energy bar and cookie producer. The other thing that I'm really happy about is that I don't use any refined sugar, color, additive, filler at all. This is a small batch. This is my home kitchen, right? So, and I'm very invested in this. Every single batch is tested. I usually throw out at least half a batch or a full batch before I'm happy to share with my friends or sell to my customers, right? So there's a lot of love. There is a lot of care that goes into every single batch. So there's a lot of, I would say, affection, I think. And so that makes sure that, you get more than, what the bar is worth, because I don't know what the bar is worth, right? Yeah.
Oh, that sounds amazing. And I love that you've really taken into consideration, like you mentioned regenerative farming.
Yep.
That's fantastic. I love that because it is such an important thing that you're, working with something that is feeding the soil so that the next batch that grows, the soil is healthy, the thing that's growing from the soil is healthy, and then what goes in your body is healthy.
Right. And, the people of Ecuador, the local farmers there, they are benefiting directly. And Chocho was discovered by an athlete, right? And he's a runner. He's an Olympic runner. So, so I know that this is great for my audience. I know this is great for the local economy. I know this is great for regenerative agriculture. So I'm looking for those sources. And so that it makes me happy that, I'm able to bring these things to my friends and my customers, which they otherwise wouldn't, find in shelves here. Yeah. And of course, I believe in being environmentally conscious. So the packaging that I use is compostable 100%. Even the labels, the adhesive is biodegradable and compostable, right? So I have spent countless hours making sure that everything that I have that in the bar is safe, healthy, and has meaning, right? Yeah.
Yes. That's awesome. I mean, really, we can't ask for more than that. And it sounds like you're filling every bar with love.
Yes.
Yes. And
Yes.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I love that the packaging is compostable, the labels too. That's just phenomenal. I mean, really, I don't think we've seen anything like that really and that you're doing it and you're growing this business is fantastic. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. And from a runner's perspective or from an athlete's perspective, because I call these energy bars for fitness enthusiasts, right? So I have really paid attention to the macros and, so it's typically it's 60% carbs and 20% fat and 20% protein, right? But mine are 60% carb for sure, but the carbs that I use are all complex carbs, right? So I use moong lentil flour, for instance, which is a brand new thing to the American market. In India, we use moong lentils to make traditional crepes and to make fritters, and we make lentil soup with these. But there is a dessert that's made with these, but again, it's only made in one part of India. So bringing moong lentil flour into an energy bar is new. Likewise, chickpea flour, right? Chickpea flour is such a wonderful flour. I mean, it's naturally sweet, so you don't have to use as much sugar when you're baking with chickpea. It has a lot of fiber, and it's high in protein, and it's naturally gluten-free. So I try and bring in all of these things that make the carbohydrate complex. So it's the energy that you get out of these carbs are long lasting. So it's not just a high that you get instantly and you're hungry, an hour later, right? So it's 60% of complex carbs, 20% of fat. So the fat that I use are all really good MCT, coconut oil, and sunflower seed butter, which is the primary ingredient. I don't use nut butters. Otherwise, I only use sunflower sunflower seed butter, which I grind at home. That's again a great, all of the amino acids, the natural, the protein, the building blocks for muscle recovery, to help you feel better after a run, to help you recover after a run, etc. They are there, right? Sugar, I use maple syrup for the most part. I'm researching this new thing called coconut nectar. There's conflicting information online about exactly what it is. So I have a couple of products that I'm testing out, and once I'm convinced that it indeed is coconut nectar, it has a lower glycemic index than even maple syrup. So maple syrup is 54, coconut nectar is 31 or something like that. So it's going to be even better, as a source of sugar, as a source of energy. So so I think a combination of all of these things. So the fact that I'm paying attention to macros, because this was something that I did for me as a runner. So I want to make sure that the people who buy these bars as runners, as cyclists, as other fitness enthusiasts also benefit from the composition of the bar.
Yeah. And that's so important too, what you mentioned about the complex carbohydrate, especially when you're doing more like endurance running, those longer distances, you need something that's going to last longer. And those gels and the goos and whatever, it's like, that's just, that it does give you quick energy for sure, but it just kind of destroys your stomach, and you just don't feel good after a while. And when you need that long energy, you've got to have something that's really good. And the fact that you're concentrating on those macros, making sure that that's got a good proportionate, right, for what you're doing for the long activity. That's fantastic. Love it. Love it. Tell us a little bit more about the support that you've received. You did mention earlier about a number of the runners really encouraged you. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So it's a story. I'll try and make it brief. I was walking with this friend of mine who is an amazing, amazing homemaker. She has 2 beautiful children, and she's an avid hiker, right? Really conscious of what she eats and how she keeps herself fit. And somebody actually pulled her down that day, the day that we were out hiking, saying, you're not even contributing to the economy, instead of using the usual, oh, you're not working? Are you just a homemaker? Are you just a homemaker is such a loaded question, especially in the Bay Area. It's an immediate downer. You're left thinking about so many things. All of us are educated here, right? All of us, have come into this country. I am from India, right? We're all immigrants. And yet, the minute somebody asks us this question, we don't have an answer. In my own case, I chose to leave the job for multiple reasons, right? I was hardly spending time with my family. There were instances of politics that I just couldn't deal with, didn't know how to deal with, and wanted better, right? I was commuting. I was spending so much time in the car. It just drowned out my spirit. And when I decided that I was going to leave, it made me feel great. It felt like that was the best decision I was taking. But 1 year later, because of the environment that we are in, because of the friends and acquaintances we have all around us, because of peer pressure, you begin to question that. You begin to regret, right? And people have even asked me, even after I launched vegan superfoods, they've asked me, you had a job as a program manager in this company. Why did you leave? And you're in this intensely competitive business. You're not making much money. Why? I mean, so I think it's really important for women to have something to push against these forces. And for me, those influences were words from really strong women. As I'm quoting Padmaja, who was one of the mentors in Vibha. We had a walk one day, and she told me, X company's loss is our gain. And I wasn't looking at it at all from that point of view. I was fully in the throes of regret, right? I'm like, oh my God, yeah, I had this beautiful job. I had worked my way up, and why did I quit over a silly principle or over things, that's a rich person's feeling, right? I was feeling pity for myself. And when she presented it this way, I'm like, oh my God, that's true, right? It's not easy for anyone to launch a business. I mean, it takes it takes enterprise, it takes courage, it takes resilience to be able to do something like that. Why am I feeling as if I made a mistake? Why can't I take this as the next chapter of my life and launch something, right? And that same week, another friend, Anita, she tasted my bars and said, this is ready. This is ready to hit the shelves, okay? Don't just sit around and try and make it even more. It is perfect the way it is. You can't make it perfecter, And so she gave me the energy I needed. She gave me the push. And then there was this third person who said, I said, I don't have the license yet. Okay, so keep working on the license and let your people know that you're working on the license. Be honest about it, be transparent about it, but get it out there. Start focusing on packaging, start thinking about that, right? Had it not been for these people, had it not been for my sister-in-law who made me realize that, it's not the end of the world if you don't have a corporate job, right? There are many different avenues out there. As a woman in your 40s, the world is your oyster. There are as many opportunities as you allow yourself, right? So I think it's important to allow these people into your life, to allow these voices to penetrate rather than, have some of the negative, they may not even be intending it as a negative influence, right? But sometimes you also become sensitive, to, when you're at home and you're in your thoughts. So I think it's important. I wanted to highlight how these women have, encouraged me, have motivated me, more or less pulled me out of depression and showed me that there is a beautiful path out there and I couldn't be happier. And I want to pay it forward, right? I want other women out there to know that, they have options, they have talent, they just have to believe in themselves. And the cottage food law, like I said, is, it doesn't take a lot of investment in terms of time or in terms of money. So just test it out, try it out. I'm sure you'll find something that, makes you smile.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love that you shared those stories because it's so true. Like the corporate career is not the end all be all.
Yep.
It really, I know, yes, the area that we live in, we are high tech. So of course it just seems like that's what everybody's going to be doing, but it's not the only job.
Exactly.
And really it takes all kinds. We are a whole community, right?
Yep.
That we all serve a purpose and we all can't be in the corporate world. I mean,
exactly.
It just is not possible for every single person to be in the corporate world.
Exactly.
And it just doesn't make sense, right? We've got to also work to our own interests and our own desires and what we want to accomplish.
Yes.
And I love that you pushed and just, battled those thoughts of regret and did I make the right choice? And maybe I should have just give up on this and go back to my corporate job. And I'm glad that you didn't because, we need more people like you who show that it's possible, right?
Yes. And thank you. The other thing I really want to talk about is I wasn't a born baker. I did not grow up baking, right? Ovens are not a thing in 70s and 80s, were not a thing in the 70s, 80s in India, right? So I didn't grow up baking. I started baking more or less about 5 years ago for my kids, when they started asking for cookies and things like that. And I watched a lot of videos. I became a member of several Facebook groups. And, if you set your mind to something, you can learn. You can, and it's so convenient these days. I mean, there are so many channels of free information. In fact, there is information overload, right? So it's not that you have to be an expert baker. You can always learn and improve in your journey, right? Like they say, you learn on the job. You get most of your, lifelong habits. You develop them on the job. Likewise, you can constantly improve. And, the cottage food law loves you to do that. So I want women out there who are on the fence thinking, oh my God, because I was one of them. Everybody bakes in this country. I mean, who am I? I would even hesitate to call myself a baker because, I'm not a traditional baker. But it's not all that difficult, right? So in the first 5 weeks, when I received my first order, I thought, oh my God, that's it. I'm not going to get any more orders. 10 orders, 20 orders, 30 orders down the line, I got feedback, I improved, right? But nobody questioned the baking ability, so this thought that I had at the back of my mind about, I'm not ready, I don't think I'm experienced enough, was just unnecessary, right? So you can learn. There's a ton of information, and I'm happy to share whatever information I have garnered, through this experience with others. So, women out there who are thinking about it, take the jump. I'm sure you can do it.
Awesome. And I will definitely have you share with us some of the things that you want to share about, where you've learned information, maybe discovered some things. We can add that to the show notes.
Sure.
And that actually kind of leads me to a question is there any particular books or podcasts that you want to share with us that you think would be really great to know?
Yeah. The Forager podcast by David Crable. I think that's the best out there for somebody who's looking to start a business through the cottage food law. He even has a tutorial. I think it's a 9-episode or an 8-episode series where he trains you step by step about how to start a cottage food business from home. So, and he interviews people who have made huge successes out of their cottage food businesses, who are out there selling internationally, right? Who are brands in themselves now. So it's very inspiring to hear those stories, and his mini tutorial really helps you through the nitty-gritty in terms of starting your own business. There are Facebook groups out there, the cottage food. There are state-specific Facebook groups which talk about the laws and regulations pertaining to the state that you're in. So I'm happy to share the groups that I am a part of. The running groups that I'm in, so I've heard from runners who follow certain diets and who benefit from certain lifestyles, right? So that has also helped me in fine-tuning my recipes, etc. I'm happy to share all of that, but I think the biggest, and for me personally, for my own nourishment, I listen to opera, Super Soul Opera. I listen to Sam Harris, so I listen to all kinds of things, but most of them around health and fitness. But Forager is the number one recommendation that I have for somebody who's looking to start a food business.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing that. And thank you again for taking the time to just go into all the detail about the differences between, the cottage food laws, the different A and B types, and sharing all that detail with us, because I think that's something I never had any idea about. And I love learning, and I love that you shared that detail with us. So thank you. And thank you again for taking time to be on the podcast today. I so appreciate it. I just love what you're doing, and I just think it's fantastic. So thank you for taking time to share it with us.
Absolutely. It's a great opportunity, and thank you for picking me. And I hope more women out there, start believing in themselves. And I'd love to try out whatever it is that they decide to adventure on.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on the show, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Desiree.
Bye.
Bye.